So, hi everyone, welcome to the Academy of Advanced Thought. And today the tables have turned. I am going to be in the hot seat. Rather than interviewing people and picking their brains, my brain is going to be picked by Lewis. And I'll now hand over to the man himself, Lewis Consoli.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. It's really an honor. So before I get into the main topic of this interview, I just want to ask you about your history with puzzles and brain teasers, IQ tests. How long have you been doing these? Have you been doing it for fun since you're little?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, so yeah, not many people know this actually because I don't speak about it very much. But my father was a very geeky type of dude, is still, and when I was 4 or 5, he brought home a computer that was running a language called B, which is the language before C, and so I started helping or learning how to code in B, and then by the late 70s C was around. But my understanding of puzzles came from my understanding of how code worked, and then the first thing that I was coding on his instruction was puzzles. So I started creating puzzles in the 70s. God, I sound really old now, but yeah. And then, by 1985, something called the Whole Earth Electronic Link, or WELL, otherwise known as the WELL, that launched in 85, I think. And I was one of the first people in there. And unsurprisingly, this is 10 years before the World Wide Web. Unsurprisingly, the internet was pretty much exclusively people who are playing games. Gaming and porn lead almost all industries, all technologies. If you want to know what the advancements in VR or AI are, then they're the industries to look at, and you'll get the answers. So yeah, in 85, I was building games, puzzle games, adventure fantasy games, question and answer games. Okay, you've arrived at a door, and the door has 2 handles, one on either side, and a split down the middle, but each side ends up in 2 different pathways. One pathway there's a wizard, and the other pathway there's a mountain to navigate. Which one do you choose, bearing in mind what you've got in your backpack? And so that's that adventure stuff, that's all in text. Okay, so in those days there's no zero visual graphic, there's no graphic card. So even if we could think of how to create graphics, there was no processor to run it. So everything that was on the screen was done in hard code. There was no what you see is what you get. It's pure code. And I learned puzzles through coding, and then created puzzles with code. There you go.
Did you have favorite puzzles growing up, those style? Was there one that?
I think I really got deeply into fantasy games, really, really deep, way before World of Warcraft. I didn't have any one particular puzzle set or type, and the names, there are so many different versions, but in the style of puzzles that I liked then were more fantasy based. But then I moved out of fantasy based puzzles into mathematical puzzles. So by the late 80s, still before the web, we started fiddling about with mathematical problems and looking at Fibonacci sequences and the Mandelbrot set, and looking at calculus really as pieces of art. And so I went so far deep into the maths world. By the end of the 80s and into the 90s, mid 90s, we started working out how to merge mathematics to society. In other words, how we could fix some of society's biggest problems, and more importantly, empower humans using algorithms, and especially cryptographic algorithms. So how we could encrypt things and decrypt things, and apply that to capitalism to balance out or democratize the whole of the capitalist infrastructure. And by 1999, that became what was called the B money paper. And the B money paper by We Die in 99 was a combination of our thinking by that point. And obviously 10 years later, that became Bitcoin.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you were making puzzles with your dad. Did he sell these puzzles? Like, did he have a puzzle company? Like,
Well, funnily enough, kind of, yeah. He did open a retail store that sold puzzles, which is strange, but that was offline. But the stock control system was online. So we did a deal with a company called Santa Cruz Systems, and the DOS system then was running on a platform called Xenix, Xenix. And so we linked our stock control system to the suppliers, and that was a puzzle in itself. But yeah, he then had a gift shop that started selling light bulbs and ended up selling puzzle games and Rubik's. He was the first person in the UK to sell Rubik's cubes. So yeah, I mean, it's all this. He was chief engineer at Marconi and NASA. He helped the satellite missions and the space missions. So I couldn't avoid it, really. I mean, I grew up inside a family. I mean, I remember when my dad was showing me about the age of 9 or 10 how numbers really work, and some of the fascinating things you can do with numbers. For instance, how you can make everything in the entire universe originate and end with the number 9. Things like that. So we would go into these puzzles of maths. In fact, on my back, I have a tattoo of what's called the Sri Yantra, which is one of the original maps of the universe, all around nines, pyramids of nines. Anyway, but that aside, so we got really, really geeky. And I remember doing this piece of homework at the age of 9 or 10 about, and I think that the homework was to discuss your favorite number and why you like it so much. And I returned a 20-page, 30-page document on number 9, and with diagrams and astronomical sequences of planetary atrophy, and they gave me a C-, because apparently I had not stuck to the brief of just telling them what my favorite number was.
wild. So a question I had was, have you ever worked on a puzzle that's part of like a marketing campaign for a TV show or album or anything like that? Did you ever get to do something?
Not for a TV show, but there were some times when there was a conversation with Nokia a long time ago when Nokia was around the 6310 launched. And I mean, I still think that the 6310 is probably the best mobile phone ever created in terms of like 5-day battery power, replaceable battery, indestructible. I dropped one off the top step of a plane staircase, on an aeroplane staircase, onto the tarmac. And it still survived, right? It's like tiny, weeny scratch. Anyway, around those days, Nokia and I were talking about something called the Nokia Game. And the Nokia Game was a question and answer game using SMS to promote the usage of short message service, because Logica CMG, who created SMS, text messaging, were working with Nokia to try, because Nokia had 80% market share, right? Maybe more at that point. In fact, at around that time, when phones hit India, the word for mobile phone was Nokia. But yeah, so Nokia and I were speaking about, and Logica was speaking about the Nokia Game at some stage. But I don't think I ever really considered letting any of my imaginings into the world for many years later. So yeah, I never approached anyone. I thought it was a bit weird, and it was my secret hobby, basically.
Okay, well, then I guess let's just segue into your favorite quote is, there's 1% of things that you know, 1% of things that you know you don't know, and 98% of things out there that you don't know that you don't know. And I think lots of people don't know that you and Vanessa created the world's hardest online puzzle last year. And that's just incredible. So
yeah, I mean, it was funny that, I mean, you know this because you were one of the players. That's the other reveal, and and one of the winners actually. But Vanessa and I were in a restaurant in Birmingham, UK, and I just finished speaking on stage, and she had bought me for my birthday a book called The Maze, and The Maze is a pictorial book where you have to get in and out of the maze in about 16 steps and then answer the riddle, and there isn't actually a riddle, so the maze itself is a riddle, And so that was probably a month, or 3 or 4 weeks after she had given me this present. And no one had, ever really properly solved it. And, and so she said to me, "How are you getting on with the maze? The world's hardest puzzle." And I said, "Yeah, I've come in and out of the maze. Yeah, it's no problem. It took me about 10 days. And I think I know the answers to the riddle." And she was just like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, I think this is what it is." And I won't reveal it on this call because just in case anyone wants to do the maze. But anyway, so I've now been in contact with the team behind it, and it is indeed the correct answer. It's just the prize pool doesn't exist anymore. But she then said, "Could you create something that's harder than the maze?" And I said, "Absolutely." I just open my head up and empty it out onto a computer, and it'll work. And so we started creating the concept over a couple of bottles of wine, and then COVID happened. So the world got hit with this. We went into lockdown, and we didn't really have very much more to do. I lost all of my speaking gigs. My book publishers decided not to publish my next book, which is called Rise of Advanced Thought, which I've now self-published. And so we thought, right, well, let's just execute this then and create the 12 rings. And we decided that we were never going to tell anyone who the 12 rings was. And we would only release 12 questions at a time on the 12rings.com. And we thought the prize was going to be $50,000, but we were going to put a paywall after the 12th step so that a few people would pay money and that would cover the prize pool. But then at the end, people would win one of the 12 rings, which we would make. And so but we went down the rabbit hole so deep that chaos then ensued. And we went from 0 people playing it to 53,000 playing it within 10 weeks or something. And it got very, very out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions are sort of, what were you expecting to happen with it, and how did it surprise you? Obviously a lot more players early on.
Yeah. So we didn't realize that there would be so many, tens and tens and tens of thousands of players. I think one of the things that I was surprised by was that I ran into a kind of a challenge in my own thinking, which was, firstly, it's very, very difficult to create a quiz of hard questions, to be the hardest online game ever created, but also make it enjoyable. And that's and I'm so pleased when it finished, because that was a daily burden of mine. Vanessa was an amazing graphical artist. She created The Secrets of the 12 Rings, the book, which is an outstanding piece of digital art, including lost pages and stuff like that then were revealed. And a lot of this thinking came from my work with Cicada, which we'll talk about maybe later. But I mean, one of the things that surprised me was that I can make questions as hard as humanly possible, but they have to actually have some form of enjoyment. And so creating a question, like for instance, creating a new cipher that people have to decrypt, couldn't be something like we found in Liber Primus, which was kind of the final stages of Cicada, or at least where we got up to with Cicada, which was kind of ran into nonsense and potentially intentional nonsense. And so, if I wrote 3 dashes on a piece of paper and said, "Here you go, here's a new cipher," people would think, okay, well, it's not Morse code. What else could it be? Maybe if we turn the paper upside down and inside out, and maybe we'll fold the paper on top of each other, and maybe these aren't dashes, they're actually ones, and maybe it's kind of like a binary. Anyway, but how much enjoyment is that? Is that maybe 15 minutes of interest to get someone to discuss a question for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, pretty much 20 hours a day, and work together on stuff was at first I didn't know how to do that, and so I learned as I went. And the first 12 questions were kind of Google search questions, And the next 12 it got deeper and deeper and deeper into mental agility. And only a very few people made it past 40 or 50. And then, you know, by the time it got to 110, maybe, there was literally maybe 20 people left in it, max, out of 53,000.
Yeah, and the other kind of puzzles like this that exist, these competitions, usually last 24 hours or 48 hours. How did you get inspired to do 12 per month for 10 months? And also the companion book, you know, talk a little bit about that, because I don't think any puzzle has a book that goes along with it like this one did.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. Well, not exactly that type. I mean, having a whole book of actual graphical graphical conundrums that linked to the graphical conundrum, you know, images that linked to ciphers, that linked to history, that link, you know, but I don't know. It's because basically the conversation that my wife and I had kind of got really out of hand. We used to drink a lot of wine in those days. We don't really drink very much anymore, but in those days we would get, you know, it was lockdown, so we would be in our little flat in London, and neither of us were working, and we had a bit of money left, so basically we just get some wine and talk nonsense for hours and hours and hours and come up with these bizarre plans. And one of them was that we were going to release 12 questions every month, but of course we wanted to finish it in December, but we started it, I think, in February or March, so we couldn't start in January 1st and end on December 31st, so we kind of shoehorned 2 sets of 12 at the end of the year in December. And it was kind of just follow. It was a part of enjoy. It was something to do that kept our brains active. And I didn't really think. I thought there was going to be maybe 20 maximum of maybe 10 or 20,000 people playing, and it obviously turned out to be way more than that. So yeah, and the companion book was her. She's sitting on the sofa drinking wine with the iPad, creating these ridiculous graphic images, and then she would like turn the iPad around and go, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, "What is that?" And she's like, "It's a picture of a tree with a heart and Eve from Adam and Eve's garden and an apple, and it makes a T and an H and an E, which is part word from a riddle, that the whole book can be a riddle." And I was just like, "Okay, great. Oh, there you go."
Yeah. So.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah. So and it went along those lines, which was a bit weird. And we just laughed. You know, we laughed and laughed and laughed and drank and drank and laughed and drank and drank, and we were just wandering around Portobello Road, you know, in lockdown, so no one else was really around. We just, you know, put on our masks, walked down Portobello Road, and which, because we lived just off Portobello Road. So yeah, it was just everything, and that became an inspiration. Portobello Road became, and especially the Gin Institute on Portobello Road, the gin palace as it is, that became a very central point to this, because it was opposite the supermarket that we used to go and get food from. So it's just, I don't know, very strange.
Nothing deeper than just it was there, and you saw it all.
I want to say that I wish there were some things that were deeper. There was an existential point running along the whole thing, which we toyed with quite a few times. We kind of thought what we were going to do is create an agency, a problem-solving agency out of the back of this, with the 12 smartest people we could find in the world. And that problem-solving agency could be, anyone could give us problems to solve and say, listen, we don't know, you know, there's a bug in our website, or there's this mathematical problem with our accounting system, or there's whatever. And then we would, or maybe, you know, we've got this picture of a person, but we can't find this person, a missing persons type agency. And we kind of felt that by people going through the quiz, they would become more aware of how they can think differently, and the edges of their brain expanding, so that they were able to really truly understand the potential within each other and themselves. That was the existential point. But Portobello Road's inclusion was purely because we literally lived next door to it.
throughout the game, you reference Cicada, Tengri 137, Not Prawn, Puzzling Odd Pawn, The Maze. Like, have you done all of these puzzles? Some of these puzzles, you know, what kind of experience do you have with these different puzzles that you mentioned?
Yeah, so all of them, and I think probably the most inspiration that I got was from my work with Cicada. So there's some stuff that I can't talk about involving that, but around 2011, in 2011 into 2012, there was a conversation about things that were people were wondering, people were becoming aware of data online that could be hidden and what privacy really meant. I was I was very much one of the loudest speakers around, most kind of popular speakers on the circuit around the point of processing information, hiding information in plain sight, and so forth. And what I can say is that, you know, around let's say January, if I remember rightly, around January 2012, there was a 4chan post, and that starting point was kind of kind of everyone entered into a rabbit hole of a puzzle that ended up being using multiple different media formats. The truth is, I was part of the trying to solve it, but also kind of part of trying to build it, if you know what I mean. So there was over the years, the problem with Cicada was that the privacy, the secrecy became bigger than it was meant to be, and some people involved in it, I think, decided on a different direction and to really start screwing with society in terms of, like, you know, really bringing people in, like a bit like Mr. Robot brings us into a meta perspective. Cicada was bringing people into a meta perspective. I didn't personally like the way that one of the directions would be down a kind of almost pseudo-religious hierarchical statement, which always troubled me. Equally with Bitcoin, at the beginning, we were all mining our own Bitcoin and then selling them to each other for 6 cents a coin, and then it became, you know, one of the schism, if you like, the offshoot went down the line of, we need to incentivize miners even more so, and they inevitably will create supercomputers, and those supercomputers will eventually centralize the entire thing, because there'll only ever be one winner. This is a race to the bottom of one, and you couldn't get more centralized. The original Satoshi vision was now seen kind of the most nearest is Minima.global, but Minima's the version that we meant for Bitcoin, and we're gutted. We were absolutely furious, actually, for many years. At the same time, actually, 2009 to 2012, two things happened. Bitcoin went in a direction that we didn't want it to go in at all, and Cicada started and then went very rapidly in a direction that we didn't want it to go in. So 12 rings is what I wanted. I would have preferred to have happened with Cicada, and Minima is what I would have preferred to happen with Bitcoin. So as you can see, a trend. Basically, if things don't go in the way that they were meant to go, I will eventually be involved in the way that it was meant to go. Yeah.
What are some elements of those other puzzles that you did bring into 12 rings in the way you design questions or the kinds of styles of questions?
Yeah, I think the first kind of similarity, I guess, is hiding information inside pictures, steganography. And so we would steg images. I mean, it's super easy to do it. It's not difficult, and it's also not difficult to decrypt it. But if you didn't know that that was where the clue was, it's you know, confusing. So yeah, we would hide information inside images, which is exactly how Cicada started. And yeah, so Cicada started in that way. And so that was all good. Everything's fantastic. You put an actual cicada moth with a particular piece of information in it, and there's maybe a PGP key, and you know, so forth. So 12 was inspired in a similar way. The using multiple media was something that we also did in both. So, you know, with 12, one of the questions ended up with a phone number being revealed that you called, and then you heard a voicemail message, or the ringmaster's voice machine, which was me speaking into a voice manipulator. And so I still got that burner phone somewhere. But yeah, so it's these things were stolen, but equally we stole it from ideas or inspiration from, not stolen, used ideas from any form of multimedia campaign. There's a brilliant Batman campaign which used like phone calls and a phone inside a birthday cake and a street march and an aeroplane across the sky with images. And so I'm a fan of multi-channel, multi-platform media, multimedia. And I think people find that interesting rather than just Google searching answers, you know. So it led people. Another challenge, by the way, is that we realized that we had to give clues, and without giving clues, I think people could still be on question 63. So clues were important, and this is why the cicada thing went south, because the first book, Liber Primus, it's the decryption was required. That's fine, but there was no guidance as to how some of these things made sense. So you know, when you end up with, and as we did with cicada, when you end up with some people who want to go in one direction and others with another direction, it's he who shouts loudest or has the most power wins. And with 12, it was me and my wife. So, you know, as far as we were concerned, we wanted to make it as fun as humanly possible and not have the experience which happened in Liber Primus, which was basically the usership. Cicada went from 10, 20,000 people playing it to 1,000 people, and there's probably now 20 people who doggedly try and work out the rest of these sodding pages that even when you work them out, I personally know that the people who created those pages are no longer have any interest in you know, they think that it's a lull. This is a kind of a lulls for the lulls situation. It's kind of like, oh, this is going to confuse the hell out of people forever, because actually there's no real answer. And that doesn't look like fun to me. That's not the way that we meant it to be. I also don't think that cryptocurrency should be controlled by 5 mining farms in Asia. That's not what liberation from blockchain is. So, and I'm so steadfast about what I would prefer to be democratic puzzles, democratic cryptography. The point is freedom in all of this. The point isn't to laugh at society and go, oh, you can never work this out, or oh, you can never actually own a Bitcoin unless you're a millionaire, or you know, I think that sucks. That's not what we meant by distributed ledger technology, and it sure as hell isn't what we meant by a fun interactive puzzle game. There you go.
Okay. So in the creation of the 12 rings, I want you to talk about kind of the different kinds of puzzles you created, and maybe the different kinds of, if you have a way to describe different kinds of puzzle solving abilities that you were trying to look for or create in people who were playing it.
Yeah, so I think what I wanted to achieve was vertical and horizontal thought. So I wanted to, if you think about from an axis of a vertical axis, what I mean by vertical thought is looking to the depths of, or what I would call ontology or the origin of, in fact, we had the origin of the 12 rings, the origin of a thought of where truth truly is, all the way up to the most esoteric, almost kind of imaginary, spiritual, ideological view. That's a vertical axis. You have root to leaf. You look at it from a tree. And then I wanted to apply horizontal thought so that we could look at things through a lens of literal through to so literal and objective through to metaphorical, subjective. And so that horizontal axis linked to the vertical axis of root ontology through to the ideological esoteric at the top. I see thought on that dual axis. And so the methods that we were looking to try and unlock with the questions and people answering them was to use all parts of that grid. So people could talk about something that was very literal, very objective, and very root cause at the bottom left-hand side of the grid. So that could be something that has an absolute answer that is findable. It just is what it is. It's a map coordinate, and the map coordinate exists in a place because that's the coordinate the map is, and the object is. Whereas on the far right, top right-hand side, we have kind of the more questions along the lines of, for instance, asking what the riddle, what the actual riddle of the secrets book is, which makes up a phrase, and what that phrase actually is, which is I know the code to Leonardo Da Vinci. That phrase is totally made up. It's not logical or literal or real. It's nowhere near the left-hand side of the grid. It's very much top right-hand side. And so you can see the stretch, which is why we started the 12 rings with the question, the simple question of who owns the fish. And that, that had probably 23,000 people never got through that. It was just, people were just like, what do you mean who owns the fish? Like, what fish? So we had tens and tens of thousands of answers. God, the ocean, my mum, the supermarket, the big fish. And of course it relates to Einstein's riddle. And well, not of course, I guess, but then when we brought the secrets out, the first page, or one of the first items you see is a massive, great big fat picture of Einstein. So yeah, we were trying to stretch people's thoughts across an axis of these two lines, and it's a bit of a head spinner because I had to balance 144 questions across those axes. Vanessa came up with kind of 2 or 3 of those that turned out to actually be some of the most complicated questions because she wasn't applying any form of deep understanding of maths or stuff like that to it. So she was applying just kind of like, hey, we should ask people about this because that would be mental. And it was indeed some of those things people were just like, and then in the Discord server where I was the ringmaster, when it came to kind of giving clues, sometimes I was like, I genuinely don't know what clues to give you because it's from my wife and I don't know where that came from genuinely, but maybe look at page 12 because that's kind of what it's linked to. And so sometimes the workings, the logic of people like you and the team, especially of the top 12 winners, some of the working out stuff went down rabbit holes which I had never considered. Like some of the things you look at was just like insane, nowhere near where we were going. Like and it was, and I kind of felt this is the dichotomy was, I felt partly really flattered that people were giving it so much energy and time, grateful, but partly guilty because it was taking so much time out of people's lives. And I feel less guilty about people who have basically nothing better to do with their time. But I feel really guilty for people who have got a wife and kids, or a husband and kids, or other responsibilities. And so I felt guilt and gratitude in equal measures.
Actually, you just touched on Einstein, and I remember throughout the quiz, you talk about Einstein, Da Vinci, Bruce Lee. If you had to pick 12 notable like thought leaders, who would be the top 12 people?
Wow. Okay, so I guess we have to define what thought leader is in this context. So for me, a thought leader is someone who pushes the boundaries in their field to open the minds of others, and that's why Bruce Lee is one of them. I think that Isambard Kingdom Brunel is another. He features in the 12 Rings. I believe what he did with the railways is, basically, and he was totally against the grain. He was a rebel. They wanted to ban his work, actually, the building of bridges and stuff like that. He was seen as a real troublemaker. So, but that's most of my heroes are, Jimi Hendrix, Albert Einstein, Bruce Lee, Kingdom Brunel. These are Isaac Newton, Alan Turing. These are people who are real rebels, and that's 7. So maybe I'd have to say that Charles Babbage is probably there as well. But then also Rosa Parks, I would say is a thought leader in terms of women and ethnic rights. So I have we're on 9 now. I think that those 9, if you look at maybe to add 10 to it, I'd say probably Ada Lovelace, who I personally believe did more than a modest hand in Charles Babbage's work. I think that Lovelace, I'm a huge fan of her mathematical prowess, and I suspect that she probably created the computer. And I think Babbage gets the credit. So I think we're at 10, right? I think we're around 10 now.
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci, I would say, is probably 11. These aren't in any order because I believe Da Vinci is a visionary and saw the world for what it could be rather than what it is. It's the same way as everyone I've mentioned. They all saw the world as it could be rather than it is. They all had expansive thought, and they were not kind of harbored within or harnessed within or chastised inside a system that they couldn't break out of. I would say that Martin Luther King holds a place in my top 12 as well. How many have I got now? Is that 12?
I think that's 12, yeah.
So Martin Luther King is there because it's not just what he was trying to do. It's more about the way that he tried to do it at the time that he was trying to do it. And what I mean by doing it was to wake up the world, but especially in this context, America, to the concept of equality. And in terms of a puzzle, the puzzle that was given, the puzzle that was there was absolute categorical inequality. Up until 1980 something, the Shea Stadium in New York had a separate entrance for people of color. Okay, so and this was like 20 years earlier, 30 years earlier. Got this Dr. Martin Luther King trying to to conjure up a vision of what equality could mean. That's a puzzle because you're dealing with bias. And one of the reasons why advanced thought is so important is because unless one is aware of one's own biases, then one can't actually break from those shackles. And let me bring that to a Platonic level and start my next 12 of thought leaders with Plato and Plato's cave. And I don't mean literally my next 12 of thought leaders. There is probably another 12, and most of them are philosophers. Joseph Campbell is there. I would say that probably one of my favorite quotes from in the world is, there's a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies our growth and our freedom, which is something that I always use as a quote from the great Holocaust survivor. But I believe that there's kind of a real meaning behind people who push the curve. And what I think all of these people, from Plato all the way through our time, and also thousands of years before Plato, were trying to enable people to think differently. And so, yeah, I think that it's not only important, but the most important thing that humans can do is to understand the way that we think, and not under any circumstances believe that we are the final version of ourselves. And you know, in the quote by Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, so there's a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl is talking about how things can happen, and they're not good or bad, they're things. Then there's a gap, and we can choose our response, and then we have our freedom. And let me apply that to everything. If you're inside Plato's cave and you're standing with your face to the wall, and you see these shadows and you think they're prison guards, and you then believe that the shackles that you have on you are immovable, because even if you could move the shackles off you, you've got these prison guards that you can see the shadows of. The truth is, those shadows are just fire. It's the shadows of fire. It's not prison guards. The prison guards are purely, exclusively in our thoughts. So from Plato's cave to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, to Da Vinci's diagram of a helicopter, to Isaac Newton's discovery of certain gravitational things, to the theoretical physicist of Albert Einstein, through to the mathematician of Ada Lovelace, we have a world of expansive thinking. And my job on this planet, and my turn around the sun, is here to do my bit, just one small part, to enable people to at least realize that they can think differently if they want to. And whilst I have breath in my body, that's my purpose in life.
Trying to move from there to the pre-written questions, I guess.
Good luck with that.
So obviously this puzzle was very, very hard. And I think that you did have an intention that you wanted us to work as teams, but the puzzle was set up that there'd be one grand prize winner. Do you think you would have set it up to encourage teamwork more?
Yeah. If I thought about it, well, put it this way, with Cicada, there was not many people working together. So it was mainly individuals. A few people discussed stuff, but there were no teams really, especially not named teams. That came later, maybe a year later, after it became kind of fashionable. But in 2012, January 2012, there's a message on 4chan. That's, everyone was, we were all, there was no team, and even the creators of Cicada, how do I put this? Were more individuals than teams. So if I lived again, then we'd have probably created maybe a team ranking order, so you could join a team, and then your team, whoever in the team got the answers first, and the whole team would then be up, and the team would win rather than the individual. But we didn't know that until at least 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months in. I think someone, maybe 2 months in, said, oh, we're going to set up a Discord server to chat this together. Someone DM'd us, and I said, yeah, cool, no worries. I didn't realize that we eventually, spin forward a couple of months, and you got, boatloads of people, thousands of people kind of forming dozens and dozens and dozens of different teams, and some of the teams were just, and it was so cute because there were teams that were purely there to help beginners. So it's like basic steps, and they would go get, you know, and then I don't know, it's just, I kind of feel a bit embarrassed because we didn't nurture it as much as we could have. I was trying to make a better version of Cicada, and we didn't. We succeeded in many ways, and we didn't do as best as we could in a number of different ways. Partly we were stumped by COVID. I mean, we had an entire 44 levels which were physical, involving not only the fixed reality, physical reality of the world, but also virtual reality spaces. So a lot of the stuff that we thought we wanted to do, let alone working out how to deal with teams, but the whole thing was kind of guided by partly our ignorance. It was super difficult to come up with questions, especially when you're dealing with people who are really smart, and there's 12 of them. Like in teams of like your team, for instance, that, you know, I would drop a question, you know, a question would go live, and my phone would just be blowing up like all the time. It would be ding, 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 24 hours a day, ding, 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 ding. And so yeah, I ran out of time basically to also then think how to rebuild the system in reverse, because kind of it was done. So yeah, lots of things I'd do differently, but I'm not planning on doing it again. Mind you, if I am doing it again, I wouldn't tell anyone that I was doing it. So unlike last time, so with 12, I'm not, I will, my puzzle world will always be anonymous from now on.
I mean, you did try very hard to make it anonymous, but you did let us know about it after.
Yeah. You joined a call with my wife and I, and that was awesome. I mean, you know, you could already worked out that it was kind of involved. You know, you some of you found out who we probably were or were, and that was okay. I mean, the anonymous side was purely because that's how we did. That's how Cicada ran, so it was quite cool. But you know, we did the same with Bitcoin. You know, Satoshi Nakamoto is the same as Kaiser Soze in The Usual Suspects, where that's where that is. That's where that's from. Just so you know, it's purely it's you know, it's it's everyone. You know, what is a Kaiser Soze? You know, people think, it's got to be Kevin Spacey because he's walking at the end of Usual Suspects, and I guarantee you he's not Kaiser Soze. Kaiser Soze is bigger than a person, as is Satoshi.
So you did get into Discord. I know you wanted us to chat on Facebook, and then you made a private group. And then we moved to Discord. Then we had the Inner Sanctum for people who bought the book. And then you had a 300,032 server for, you know, extra training. I mean, there was a lot of discussion, and you told us all kinds of things, that you were 12 people, that you were all over the world, that you had different personalities, that you spoke every language, you know, that you might be computer AI. You did a lot. Talk about how you decided to do that interaction with us.
So I guess it was kind of adding to the fun of it, you know. Some people, Stealth, for instance, one of the players in your team, would really get off on who he was speaking to. So if he was speaking to physics, for instance, he'd be, you know, I'd create a character called Physics who's spoken certain ways about certain things and had certain biases. Then there was Logic, you know, and so it's so funny, right? Or chemistry. The truth is they're all me, right? So I was the only one who did any of that interaction, and all of the characters were myself. And yeah, I do speak a bunch of languages, but not in that way. And yeah, a part of my personality is all of those topics, but not certainly to an expert level. What I am an expert in is how we think. So, you know, from a neuroscience diploma level through to a, you know, collegiate level, that's I have those qualifications, but I'm certainly not a chemistry professor or whatever, but I have enough information to be dangerous. So so I can roll with a conversation about astrophysics pretty deep, without kind of running out of tarmac. But then my dad, when I was 5 years old, he would say, right, so do you think, bearing in mind the only thing that we can truly know is the universe is in entropy, do we think that the Big Bang actually happened at the end of something or at the beginning of something? That's at age 5. So, I was always ruined by that point onwards. So yeah, it's his fault, and I thank him eternally for that.
Another question actually is just, how did you find so much time to make a website, humor us every single day with some reactions and hints? How did you fit that into your life?
Well, it's interesting. This is a concept that, by the way, I've just Googled, I've just searched, and The Secret of the 12 Rings is still available on Amazon. I'm over the moon by that. Ships in 1 to 2 days. Great. Okay. So that's useful to know. I cover this in Powered by Change, my second to last book, the Sunday Times bestseller, and I cover it inside something called the attention management matrix. And the reason I seem to have so much time is because A, time is my most precious commodity other than air, and B, I'm really, really particular about how I use my time, like really militant, every minute. And there is a load of time if you look at every minute as a unit of energy. So I will spend 6 minutes on Facebook each day, maybe 7. And I will spend 10 minutes reading the news, but no more. And I will spend 90 minutes watching a Netflix drama, Amazon Prime drama, 90. If it's a 1 hour episode, then I'll watch 1.5. On the weekends, I'll watch 2 hours per day. But I'll equally spend at least 1 hour a day in the gym. Today I've done a class at 6:45 spinning, and I did another core class an hour and a half later for an hour. So I spend an extraordinary amount of time working out in comparison to social media and bullshit stuff like that. And so the time in the day to look after this game really was done on my phone when I was walking different places, in and out of the gym, warming up at the gym, waiting for the spinning class to start, pressing juices, going for walks. I walk at least 5 to 10 kilometers a day, sometimes 20 to 25 kilometers a day. I listen to audiobooks all of that time. So I'm listening to at any one time 4 or 5 different audiobooks, and I get through 4 or 5 audiobooks probably every 2 weeks. So I read between, 8 to 10 books a month through Audible. And I have done since Audible came out. So, if I add in management of the 12 rings, it probably took up 2 hours a day in total, maybe 3. I sleep for 6 hours a day, not more. And I take a 15 to 20 minute nap in the afternoon. So yeah, there's a load of time in the day. There's loads of time. It's just, I just don't spend it with trivial crap, because there's no productivity in that. I don't get anything from spending more time on social media or stuff like that. Or looking into celebrities that look thinner and more handsome than me. It's like, what? Comparison doesn't serve me. Comparison or fear, in fact, are 2 absolute fictions and should be banned.
So what are some things that surprised or impressed you about the different players and the player skill sets that you met through this puzzle?
One of the things that I was surprised by with the various players and the skill sets was, what I loved was that your team, the winning team, all had different skills. So you had Stealth and Arcane, who are super duper Python heads, and everything was based on, you personally seem to have a kind of like a more more similar to me in terms of 360 view of different things. You can do different stuff. You have multiple skills, but you're also older than them and more mature than them. So you're more academic. I don't know, maybe more broadly academic. They were, they had their preferences, and I could see, and then you had Radian, who Radian didn't say a lot, but when he did, it was really useful. I thought that was quite cool. Barb or Barra, what I really liked about Barra was that Barra seemed to be quite philosophical and kind of goodwill, kind of keeping the energy up and stuff like that. Jack or Sander seemed to be quite periodical, so they would drop in and drop out, and certain things they would be really, really good at. Dee, I didn't see a lot of, but I know was involved in things, but she was maybe more probably less vocal. Whereas if you look at someone like Stealth or Arcane, they're constantly at it, and but they don't. It was a weird year, right? 2020 was a strange time globally, and that bearing in mind where they are in the world, and Radian in Indonesia, that it was a dark time, and arguably still in some cases is. But I loved how you would interact together, and your humor. I felt a bit bad. I felt really guilty about Stealth sometimes, because it seemed that Stealth, I mean, everyone worked really, really hard, but he seemed to not stop ever. And I felt really bad that it was just like, dude, just maybe take a break and stand back, because he'd get more and more and more frustrated. And I really felt for him. You seemed to be almost like the dad of the group, in terms of, like you'd say, and you still do it. I still see you in the Discord, kind of you're kind of more like, all right, guys, are we working on this now? Are we doing this? Let's focus our energy on this. I found that I'm trying to be as grateful as and awarding as possible. One of the things that I thought was sometimes lacking was any logical record keeping by all players. You kept records continuously of what was said, what was clued, what was answered, what was, all that kind of stuff. And so you seemed to have a map. Other people sometimes did, but there were some people, even the top 12, that I don't think actually remembered what had happened beforehand, or had really reread the pins, or kind of thought, well, hold on a minute, we've used that number before. Then 46901 was used here, and that meant the letter B, but here it was a date. So it's a real mind blower. I still can't quite believe that we did it. But yeah, I just hope that people found it at least mind expanding to some extent, if nothing else, than to learn how to work with different skill sets across the entire world in real time.
And I guess, kind of talking about skill sets and all, if you were to create your ideal puzzle solving team of like 4 people, or go into an escape room with a couple of friends, like what are the skill sets you think I'm not sure how many you need to go with you, but like, what would a great group of 4 be like?
I think you need specifists and generalists. So in a group of 4, I'd probably look to have a generalist like you, who actually has a 360 view of stuff, and maybe 3 specialists who a deep coder to an AI level, if possible. The reason for that is that I believe that we can outperform many things if we can structure our artificial intelligence, or at least machine learning, in a way that can think faster for us in things that don't require emotion, or in things that would be dangerous if we applied emotion. For instance, there's 3 commas. The trading app is very useful to have micro scalps of movements of crypto. So taking it, Cardano, for instance, in the last 12 hours could have been scalped 50 or 60 times, maybe 160 times. Take profit, sell, take profit, buy, take profit, and so forth. And that stuff is way easier to do with AI than it is to do with humans. So I would say a deep AI coder, ideally. So a generalist who understands the way that puzzles are structured and thought patterns work. At the other end of the spectrum, a deep AI coder. I'd probably say in the middle of those two edges of four, if I was appointing four, so me plus four, I would say generalist, deep coder, and in the middle, it would be a mathematician, someone with extraordinarily advanced skills, someone like Jasmine, who's involved in Minima, with her first class honours degree in maths, is the type of brain that you need to do things in life much of the time. So we have generalist, creative generalist, that is, deep AI code, mathematician, and then you probably need, in my view, someone who is in between those, who is able to apply logic. And that could be from a philosophical logic perspective, but I see it just as logic or rationale. So that ability to think in ratio is something that is very, very rare. It's something I've worked on for all of my life, and again, I credit my dad for that. But logical thoughts, logos, units of logical thought, is a structural talent that some people have, and very, 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 very few do actually have. Most don't. Logical thought, for instance, bearing in mind that we think 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same as the day before, we tend to be sleepwalking. We are trying to lose weight, then we have an extra slice of cake because it feels nice. It's been a really hard day. That's not logical. We had asthma as a kid, and we still smoke cigarettes because we were in a really stressful job. We are really, really scared about the dangers of our roads, but we continually drive over the speeding limit. These are all misjudgments of logic. And if you can logically figure out that having a glass of soul cleansed juice, which is from leafy vegetables, all cold pressed, makes you feel better, then why would you have a beer when you can have cold pressed vegetable juice? Logically speaking, really seriously. And that's not the way that most people think. So I would say you have a generalist, a logician, a mathematician, and a deep coder. That's my four.
Wow. I do think that just talking about this puzzle, someone who listens to this might be like, oh, I want to try that. Would you put a couple questions, in the chat, or, how could anyone see some of these questions?
You know what I would like? I would like some people to build the 12 rings in Maxima on Minima. And by the time this is seen in months to come, but hope maybe we'll broadcast this next week, but we are moving to a stage with Minima where people will be able to build in Maxima, which is the scalable layer 2. And I would be over the moon if the 12 rings was built in Maxima as one of the first quiz puzzles in, the questions and answers exist. Very, very, very few people in the entire world know the answers. You are one of them. And I would say there's no more than 20 people in the universe that know the answers, all of them. Because we shut the quiz down, and so we took it offline, so no one can actually do it. And one of the reasons we did that is because I was really happy that it was done. It was like, yay, we're on, and now I don't need to think things all the time or handle questions and problems. There's a lot of customer service involved, dude. Tens of thousands of different email exchanges, stuff that didn't work, crashes, and I put this information in, and I got the answer right, but it said it was wrong, and all this kind of stuff. It was endless. So I would love the 12 rings to reappear in Maxima. That would be a great way of using a truly decentralized blockchain to show what fun can be had with it.
I think our time's kind of up, and I think I got through almost all my questions. So,
good man.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Well, I hope this is editable into something that you feel happy with, and I'll leave you to do that, because you firstly, it's you are the interviewer, and secondly, you could probably order it in a way that that might make sense in terms of the flow, because I'm aware that I ramble. You know, asking me who my favorite top 12 thought leaders are is like, that's a rabbit warren, a hornet's nest, a rabbit hole. I could speak for 5 hours on my thought leaders and why they're thought leaders. You know, I could literally spend the rest of the night speaking about Einstein, just Einstein. So yeah.
Next week's topic, right?
Yeah, let's do one a month, one thought leader a month for the rest of the year. Next year. Man, no, it's great fun. I really appreciate it.